Cool. So this, what I hope to achieve here is that we, kind of like what happened with Tanner by accident, where we started troubleshooting while we were explaining it. That's what I want this to be. So some of this is going to be things that you're like, I know how to do that, and that's good. We just want to make sure we're all unified, because although we have different programming when it comes to Easter, Christmas, anniversary weekend, big elements, we're going to be doing the same things, and Resolume is going to be the tool that we use, because at the end of the day, it's just a tool. We can do church without a lot of the things that we have, but we are blessed with these great things, so let's make sure we are good stewards of that. So yeah, Tanner kind of talked through this, but I want you guys to understand what is the difference between like a composition, a deck, a clip, a column, a group, a layer. So when you stare at this interface, it's not confusing. It's like, no, I know exactly where that is. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to literally go top to bottom, left to right, over the interface, so you understand where things are, what they do, and why you use them. Who, what, where, why. So up at the top, you obviously see composition. And when I click the composition, I see composition. Something that you might run into, you see how this master 100% speed 1. If I do this, obviously master goes to 0. What you never want to adjust is this speed right here. That 1 means 30 seconds, or 30 frames, I'm sorry. So all of the content that we're using is built for a specific frame rate. This 1 is what you want. If you adjust this either way, that's going to, see how up here, this guy, that changes the speed of playback. So that means if you have anything that is with SMPTE or anything that's freewheel, if this is not at 1, it's not going to play back at a true ratio. And then you can just 1, enter. So that's just so you know. Down here with video opacity, opacity is essentially how much of the content is actually displayed on the output. So 100% opacity means 100% true, correct color content. So if let me pull in a file real quick, just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Which I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I'm going to try to make this as efficient as possible. Over in the bottom right-hand side, you obviously see files, sources, effects, slices, compositions. We'll get into what all of that does later. But right here, where you have weekend and resources, these are called decks, and this is where compositions that you have previously made exist. So if I'm over here at compositions, and I want to pull in a countdown, I can either drag and drop or double click, and now that shows up in a deck. So this is a composition, and the composition is now in my deck for the greater composition, if that makes sense. Everyone tracking? Cool. So we have SMPTE1 column, and then FW, which means freewheel. So SMPTE means that it's obviously taking an audio input, and freewheel means that it can play on its own. So if I click the bottom of a clip, this is a clip, I see SMPTE1 right here, and then I see that it has an offset of zeros. Those zeros stands for hour, minutes, seconds, and frames. So if I change this, and I want it to start a minute into the file, that means when I play back from Ableton, it's not going to be correct. So I want to make sure that stays at 0. If I have a clip that has freewheel on it, that means it's running off the timeline. You see all these different options here. When I move timeline to SMPTE1, the default is to offset it to all zeros. Same for SMPTE2. If I click that, it defaults to all zeros. We'll get into the difference between SMPTE1 and SMPTE2 later. For timeline, when you move a clip to timeline, you see these different transport controls. This is your transport settings for your clip. This is where any modulation to a clip that you pull in can be adjusted. So it defaults to be a loop and then restart. What we do when we do freewheel is we want it to play once and clear so it doesn't hold on the last frame, and then change this playback to relative. So what that means, if it's on restart, anytime you click the header of the column, it's going to leave, or if it's on restart, that means anytime I click this up here, which arms the clip, and I don't know why it's outputting that weird, but it's fine. That means it's going to restart. If I set it to relative, which is where we want, that means when I jump from the SempD column, what freewheel is actually doing is it's tracking where SempD left off. So if I am on SempD 1, there's 10 seconds left in the countdown, and I jump to freewheel, it will start playback exactly where the SempD column left off. So that means your transition can be a little more seamless, and you won't see the transition because we have it set to the 3-second crossfade. Does that make sense? Cool. You can also, for whatever reason, on your playback, you can set it to bounce, which means it plays all the way to the end, and then would play backwards. So if you've got some visuals that you want to play backwards instead of loop, which I don't know why you would want to, you can do that from default. I'll pull in just a random file so we can kind of play around with that. You know what? No, I want to keep going through the actual user interface. Up here, you see out Reso 1, out Reso 2, and then we have flow and these different layers within. So everything left to right in Resolume is a column. Everything top to bottom is a layer. And if you can add layers. So let's just work through what we have. Here we have layer 1 visuals, layer 2 lyrics alpha, layer 3 lyrics blend, and layer 4 flow. And I'll explain why we have things in certain layers that we have them in. So this layer 1 visuals, this is like home row. This is like straight up my hands on the middle of the keyboard. This is what is the base for everything. And the way Resolume works is that if you add anything on top of an existing clip, that will either, if it's alpha, display just the text, or if it's not, it will usurp what's already on bottom, which is why we have a separate background file and clock file. Obviously, we have these velocity faders right here. That's what the V stands for, total velocity. And it functions with the MIDI controller as well. But for the purpose of showing you guys how to use Resolume without a MIDI controller, I want you to know. If I am on a column, I'm outputting content, and I just, say for instance, just want to see the clock, I can pull that down, and now I just see the clock. Or if I don't want to see the clock, I can pull that down. Still not sure why that's doing that, but it's fine. You guys get the picture. Also, when you click this column, or when you click a clip, it does show up in your preview monitor down here. So that's kind of like when you preview a camera shot, you're safe to just do whatever. If you need to modulate something real time, you can just click the bottom of the label and see what's going on. So I mentioned that these 4 layers are in a group. If I right-click out Reso 1, I can add a layer into that group, which you shouldn't need to be doing that, but just so you know, I can remove the group and layers. I can remove the group but keep the layers. So just for example's sake, I would do this, and now they're not a part of a group, but I want them to be. So I'll shift-click and group and new. Rename out Reso 1. And I want all of these to be in that group. And you can see them kind of shift into the group folder. Again, you should never need to do this, but just so you have the awareness. So, like I mentioned earlier, we have these 4 different layers in this one group, and they all serve a different purpose. Lyrics Blend is different from Lyrics Alpha. What Lyrics Blend, you see how the opacity is set, or the velocity is set to 50%, which if you click on it, well, yeah, anyway. You can, say for instance, you've got some visuals and lyrics that are time-coded, but you feel like the lyrics are just a little bit difficult to see. In Resources, this deck right here, we've made a lyric bar. So if I just Command C and then go back here and paste, now I have this. Well, weird. Anyway, you guys can still see the content. Anyway, what that does, that lyric bar, it essentially makes an opacity black, kind of black background so lyrics can lay and be visible. And then flow. What flow, you guys, I mean, we live kind of in flow world. In the Resources tab, which again, this is in the template that you all have, there is this video router that has been renamed to flow group. So this, if I didn't have this, say that's gone, that is in a source. So it's called video router. It's all the way at the bottom, which you can also just type video router. So say you have a clip and you want to make a flow group out of it. If I click and drag this and just click on it by default, you'll see in your clip transport, okay, video router, 100%, 1920, 1080. Blend mode layer determined. Input layers below. This is how the video router comes default. If I leave this as layers below, it will take every single clip that is below that and just throw it all at the same time. What you want to do is click that, and you see all of these different options. I want that video router to reference flow, the flow group. You see how we have flow layer 1, 2, 3, 4, but I want anything that I push up in that flow group to show up in flow. So I can click that, and boom. Now any content that is in your flow group will output through that video router. Does that make sense? It doesn't just happen by accident. And then you can rename the clip. And now, anytime I copy this into a deck, it will contain the input of flow. Make sense? Cool. Let's play around with some actual, or not play around. Let me show you kind of everything. Obviously, Arena, you can got preferences. On your settings, what you want to do is, in your composition settings, your frame rate has all of these different options. We've kind of played around with this in the past, but auto is going to give you the cleanest video playback, because that means that the video is going to play back as it's intended to, versus you trying to force it to play back in 60 frames, 50 frames, 30 frames, 25 frames per second. So when you're saving something, keep it in auto. Make sense? Cool. I actually don't want to, but it's fine. In composition, you obviously have a new comp, open recent, all of these. You pretty much only need to live in this top section. With deck, that is essentially the long form way. If I want to add, I just go insert after. You guys should all be familiar with that. And group, kind of similar thing. This menu, you can do it the menu way, or you can just right click and insert above, insert below, duplicate, etc. Same with layer, same with column. Clip is a little different. This is where you can modulate things and change things, but it's because of the layout that we have down here, it's much more intuitive, user-friendly to just drag an effect versus okay, I got to click over here. I want a new source, a new effect, and then find it. That's the cumbersome way to do it. Output, you saw me earlier go into advanced output, and it shows my different displays that I have as an option. Andrew will explain all of this later, but this is essentially how things actually get to a screen. If you don't have a screen setup or a slice, it's not going to go anywhere. But I'll let him explain that. Shortcuts, you saw Tanner do this earlier with MIDI. If for some reason the MIDI controller, one of the keystrokes got lost, if you press Edit MIDI or Command-Shift-M, it then allows you to, let's say I want weekend to go to that when I hit my R button for whatever reason. You can do that. That's how you edit MIDI. And then View, these are all intentionally set up right here. So if I wanted to link this with Ableton and have Ableton from the computer come in, I can show Ableton link, which we don't do that. If we were playing audio from Resolume, I have my audio controls, but again, we don't do that. You guys get the picture. Resolume is one of those things that because we have a template based, you can play around with as much as you want to, and you always have your safety net of template. Template is your safe place. Let's see. I think that's it for like user navigation. Let's go and play with some clips. So you can also, if you're only using flow for something, it doesn't have to be in this top layer. You can bring it down here. So like that's my home base. If you do, say for instance, you need to run Resolume and ProPresenter from the same computer, but you want to have visuals and you want to have lyrics, you can have flow group here, and then you can siphon or NDI ProPresenter in. I might be getting ahead of myself right now, but that is something that you can do. For the sake of examples, let's pull in. Yes, the highest clip in your group is the thing that ultimately goes above everything else. So here's an example. Say we have these visuals right here, and I have my flow group, but I swap. Doesn't matter what I do, because I have this blank up here, that means that nothing is going to get to the screen. I have to have that. Okay, let's say we have these flow visuals. We like the movement of them, but we don't like the color of them. This is something that we find ourselves doing at Ballantine all the time. There's this fancy little effect tab right here. If you guys haven't spent an hour or two just dropping every single effect onto a clip and playing, I would encourage you to do that. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn how things are helpful and how things we would never use them ever. So let's start with add subtract. And notice this. When I am adding effects to a flow group where there are multiple clips, I'm not going to add the effect to the individual clip. I'm going to add the effect to the actual flow group. So when I make an adjustment, it makes the adjustment for every single clip. So I like this look. I'm going to add subtract to my flow group. And then because I added it to a clip, now my add subtract transport controls are down here. So let's say I want to make this more of an orange than a purple. So let's add some red. And now we've got more of an orange look. It's like, okay, well, I don't love that. Let me make it really orange, which looks terrible, but for the sake of the illustration. And then what you can do is, if you want to kind of A-B quickly what you just did, if you press this B, that blacks it out. It takes the transport off, and then I can add it back. Like, okay, let me move a little more. Or no, I want to go a little less. Let's go green. Along with that, I've seen this ticket before where someone is like, hey, my master is all the way up, but there's no content. That's probably because this B button is pressed. That's blacked out. Or hey, I'm only seeing this and nothing else, that's because this S is solo. Make sense? Cool. So let's say, man, I like that add subtract, but maybe not for this look. So I'm going to get rid of that. Let's throw on, one we often use is hue rotate. You've probably seen that in the production notes. Hey, we added a rotate saturation of this and control of this. This one is super easy to use. If you just go your hue rotate, you're literally rotating the hue of the file. It's not that complicated. And then if you're like, okay, I like this color, but I want it to be a little more aggressive, if you add your saturation scale, then it's really going to pop. Or if you take it out, now it's just black and white. And again, there's a lot of different things you can do with this. Say I actually want to become a motion graphics designer. If you add this iterate, you can actually move the destination of X, Y, and Z axis. If I want to make it go nuts, it doesn't even do anything. Anyway, you get the picture. You should play with these. Something I love to use is a blur. It just kind of, especially if there's something aggressive like this, you can make it a little softer and blur out your visuals. You don't want to make anyone go on an acid trip, but you know what I'm saying. Let's actually build out a weekend. Is that cool? Cool. For the sake of my workflow, I'm going to jump into the Valentine machine instead of trying to do this on my computer that doesn't have everything set up. Which is going to be a different template, I know. So every single weekend when you are building your composition out, like Tanner showed you, we should start with opening the template. So every weekend when it's time to build, I will go to open recent and then template. What we've done in the past is I've also made a template-based or a graphics package-based template. So when I open the template, it actually comes with the doors look, countdown look, welcome look, close look. But the fastest way to build a composition, not that you're trying to do this for speed, but sometimes you might swap a song out, that kind of thing. If I go to my compositions tab, we obviously have these resources that we've made for you. So I will go to graphics package, double click. If the computer wants to listen. Great. And then I'll go to countdowns, double click, and you have your content here. The workflow that I have found is best if I just scroll all the way down and click this clip right here, which is actually a blank clip, and then scroll all the way up, hold shift, and then click the top right. And then I'll copy that over, Command C, and then scroll over to my main weekend deck, paste. There is my countdown. I'll go to my graphics, and what I do is I'll copy doors and welcome, Command C, jump over here, and there's a method to why I did that. I will go into my song 2 column and paste there, but then grab this again and then cut that content out and then go back into doors. So I have my doors look and then copy the welcome, move over and go into my close, pull that. And then what I like to do is I go ahead and throw flow groups into my columns. So I'll copy, and I'm going to show you guys a life hack real quick. So if I paste this, instead of copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, a function in Resolume is if you hold the Option key and then click and drag, it actually keeps the original file, but then moves. If you just click and drag, you just move it. But when you hold Option, it functions that way. So I'll do that, and then I'll paste there, and then again, Option, click and drag, Option, click and drag. So now I'm set with this. The reason that we have these blanks is if I don't have a blank, so let's say I'm here, I'm happy with this look. The blank acts as a clip. So you see when I click song 4, it jumps to the top. If I click this, which is blank, it jumps to the bottom. So then I lose the ability to see content in my deck. Yes? So this, see how this group says out Reso 2? That's for any Septron, Pixel Bar, whatever LED kind of you're using, because that is going to a different output. So because I'm in the Valentine machine, when I go to this output, advanced output, it shows all of my different destinations. So this output shows it shows the layout. At Valentine, we use Septrons, not Pixel Bars, but same concept. So building a composition, you can do it one of two ways. Say you know a song that you want to use, but it has everything built out with it. So say we're going to do available as song 1. You're not going to do available as song 1. I can just click the comp and then move it over. If you do available as song 1, you might want to reevaluate. Rethink that. And great, because I already had my flow groups there. When it moves into content, it'll show up. Looks like that file is literally just lyrics. All right. Let's pull in some reflect visuals, which are actually, I kind of like the reflect visuals, not going to lie. If you double click a clip, it will preview in the preview monitor. Did you know that? Cool. But it won't actually show up anywhere. It's just literally a preview. And then just I was trying to say click and drop at the same time. Drag and drop. One thing to note, I like to have thumbnail view on in my toolbar, but if you click this little guy, it doesn't show up. That had me confused for like 3 weeks one time, because I'm like, I used to be able to see my clips and now I can't. What is going on? It's literally that one button. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I like that clip for flow down. I like this for flow big. Boom, I've got content. So I've got my song 1, I've got my song 2. I don't need this freewheel column because the first one is actually freewheel. So if you just right click, remove, you can do that. And then I can name, let's call, if song 1 is available, let's make song 2, Here I Am to Worship. And you can literally just type. And that's easy. So rename, available. Great. Something I didn't mention earlier, this drop-down bar shows you where you're looking. So everyone should be on EC Visuals content, and that allows you to see your folder structure. Or you can just click up, and it shows you all of your options, and then I can click EC Visuals content. Make sense? Cool. Tanner kind of touched on timecode earlier, but let's do some timecode, and then probably a bathroom break. Cool. I need to set up my audio inputs. Do you guys know how to do that? I'm kidding. Everyone was helping Tanner earlier, and that was a blessing. So input, for some reason, the way that these interfaces function is that you can't set an output if you don't have the input selected first. Or no, opposite. I said that backwards. You can't set an input if you don't have the output set. So I had to set the output first. And then down here, I need it to be input 1 because I have SMPTE 1 and I'm using the first input in this Scarlett. So obviously if I'm here and you don't see any SMPTE rolling, it's because Ableton isn't rolling. You guys have probably all had the issue of my clock is not correct in Resolume and audio starts whatever. I guess I should show more Ableton for this. Anyway, the way that I think you know this, but the way that Ableton works with timecode was that it's a dedicated output. You don't want to hear it. Trust me. It sounds like angry alien pig squealing. But timecode is essentially sound, and it's sound that's measuring time. And in Ableton, if you literally, there's a layer, if I move it to the left or the right, that adjusts where playback for video happens. So earlier I said, hey, our offset is set to 0, which means the playback LTC file is also 0. There is a Google Drive that already has every single time code, hour, minute, second, frame built out, or you can go to LTC. It's like ELLTEESEE.com, where you can download SMPTE files. But they're all measured at 30 frames per second because there's 30 frames in a second. Yay. But yeah, if you're ever struggling with a more substantial timecode issue than a few frames, you'll actually need to go into Ableton or have your drummer do it, and it's literally just timelined. I don't know. Do you need to see that? Do you know how to move an Ableton clip? Cool. So, like I said, timecode has its own audio file. So it looks like a black bar, but that's just because it's loud. So if you see it tracking, you see timecode outputting right here. But let's say I want it to end earlier. It's literally as simple as click and drag. Are you guys all seeing a countdown right now? Does that make sense? What you can also do in Ableton is if you click anywhere into an empty song, on the bottom left side, when you're hovering over it, it tells you how much time that is. So you'll notice down here when I click around, you'll see the actual duration. So minute 54, minute 57, 2 minutes, etc. So sometimes our countdown, there's a longer intro, so it's actually like 2 minutes and 3 seconds, but you make sense? Get it? So but yeah, you can also just click and drag, and when I click and drag, it shows me how much time I have selected. So I just selected 45 seconds. Or if I want to do the whole thing, I just click and drag. Great, 2 minutes and however many seconds. So see up here how it says a minute or 133. That is the beats per minute, which is the tempo of the countdown. If I click warp, that means that I can actually change the tempo for that individual clip, but it doesn't change anything else. You don't want to do that because then that'll actually change the tempo of timecode, because timecode is sound that's measuring time. And if I make this like follow versus lead, you don't want to do that. This should be how timecode is set. It should not be warped, and it should not be following. You can also, sometimes timecode can come in real hot. You can adjust the gain, but if you adjust the gain here, you need to adjust the gain on the Scarlett. So it's best to not do that. Everything should be zeroed out. JMix has done Ableton training courses before, and I'm pretty sure they're available on Elevation Worship Resources YouTube. I can confirm that.